Thank you everyone for joining us today for this session, which focuses on developmental services for children and adults in Peel region. Before we start the session, I would like to acknowledge the land on the behalf of PNSG, Peel Newcomer Strategy Group. I would like to acknowledge the land on which we work is the treaty lands of territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabeg, Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, the land that is the home to Métis, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this specific treaty land. Thanks again for joining this session, everyone. I'm Shreya Seksaria, the Service Integration Specialist at Peel Newcomer Strategy Group. Peel Newcomer Strategy Group is a local immigration partnership in Peel, based at United Way of Greater Toronto. We work to support the stakeholders in championing a coordinated and collaborative strategy for successful engagement and integration of newcomers into the community and economy of the Peel region. And talking about today's session, today's session will focus on developmental services available in Peel and how the clients can be supported through different programs offered by the government. We have 4 speakers today. We have speakers from Developmental Services Ontario. We have Child Development Resource Centre, Peel's Crisis Capacity Network, and Service Solutions Peel. We have a full agenda, so without further ado, I'm gonna invite my first speaker, Sarah from Developmental Services Ontario. And now I'll pass it on to Sarah to take the floor. Sarah, over to you.
Thanks for that. So I'm Sarah. I'm the Peel Deference Service Navigator at Developmental Services Ontario. So my role is kind of helping families navigate non-ministry funded services within their respective area. I'm joined by my colleague Jessica Pearson, who's the Waterloo Service Navigator. And let me get started by sharing my screen. Okay, so welcome. We're just going to go into a little bit about what Developmental Services Ontario provides, eligibility, and the works. So Developmental Services Ontario, or DSO, we are the access point for adults 18 and over who have a confirmed developmental disability and wish to apply for services and supports funded by the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, or the MCCSS. DSO confirms eligibility. We gather information for the applicant's supports need, and we maintain information that's relevant for the file to complete referrals for different registries. So when to apply for developmental services, anyone can start applying at the age of 16. It's best to start early on just because it can be a lengthy process. And we want to ensure that there's a smooth transition from child services to adult services. If eligible, the application for developmental services and supports, or the ADSS, support scale, the CIS-A, can be completed at 17 and 10 months or older. From there, you would be able to have referrals to different services being made once the applicant turns 18. So how to get started, there's really 3 different types of ways you can connect with us. Usually, if the applicant's in school, the school will provide the application process package to them when they turn 16. You could also call or email us to get that started, or you can log on to the provincial website and begin that intake process and submit consent. From there, DSO will review all of the documents that you sent us, and then we can tell you if you're eligible, ineligible, or further documentation is needed. If you're deemed eligible, you can use this letter when you're applying for ODSP, and that aids in that process because you've already shown that you do have a confirmed developmental disability. So that's one nice piece of this.
Sarah, I'm getting this message in the chat box that your audio is cutting off for some people.
Oh,
Cynthia, I also see your hand up.
Sarah, if you move your microphone a little bit closer
okay.
to your, it should work a little bit, a little bit better.
Sorry about that. Hopefully this is better. Is this better?
Is that better? Maybe you can.
Maybe just making sure that everyone else is muted. That might help too.
Okay, if there's more problems along the way, just put your hand up or say something. I can't really see everyone, so it's hard for me to navigate that. We're gonna skip that slide though. Okay, so the developmental disability definition. Sorry, if you could make sure you're muted so that everyone else can hear properly, that'd be very great. So we look at cognitive and adaptive functioning from the psychological assessment, sorry. And this is determined by a psychologist or a psychological associate. So a cognitive assessment indicates their overall intellectual abilities, whereas adaptive limitations measure their capacity to gain independence and apply skills in their everyday life. If an assessment is completed after the age of 18, we would look at to see that the psychologist clearly noted that the disability began before the age of 18 and is expected to continue all of their life. If the assessment is completed after or before the age of 18 and you meet the cognitive and adaptive functioning levels, then age of onset information is not required.
Sarah, I think some folks are not able to listen to you still. Do you want to try by switching off your camera? Maybe there's a...
Sure. Sorry about that, everyone. Hopefully this is the last attempt to fix this. So for eligibility, we look at three things. We look at age, make sure they're an adult, Ontario residency, and confirmation of a developmental disability. So for this, we're looking for documents that would display their name and date of birth for age. For Ontario residency, same thing, name and Ontario address. So this could be a school report card or photo ID card. And then for developmental disability, we're looking at a psychological assessment signed by a psychologist or a psychological associate registered with the College of Psychologists of Ontario or an equivalent in another province. So once confirmed eligible with us, we'll schedule 2 meetings. These meetings are pretty lengthy in time. So the first meeting is the ADSS, like I mentioned before. This is when we would have the meeting with the applicant to get to know about their likes and dislikes, about their current living situation, their communication methods, and what their goals are. So basically, we're gathering information to paint a picture of the applicant with words. And then the SIS tells us more about the level of support the applicant needs to be successful in areas like home living, community activities, employment. So this is where we also look at what they need in terms of medical and behavioral needs. And this helps us gather information to paint a picture of the applicant with numbers. Both meetings can happen virtually or in person. And then once the meetings are done, we prepare an assessor summary report, which is basically a profile on the applicant based on the information that was shared, and then referrals can be made based on the information that was collected during these 2 meetings. They usually happen between 1 to 3 weeks apart, with the ADSS always being done first, and then ideally the meeting would consist of the applicant, our DSO assessor, and 2 other individuals that know the applicant well. So service registry referrals, we can make referrals to ministry funded services and supports that are requested during the application process. It all depends on what's available in your specific region that you're residing in. It is a voluntary process, and we do want applicants to be ready, willing, and able to join the programs if selected to participate. We do maintain a registry, which is kind of like a list of people who want ministry-funded services and supports, although it is not a first-come, first-served type of list. So these are some of the services and supports that we can provide referrals for. So we don't provide the services directly, we just do referrals to different agencies that are then providing the support for the applicant. So right now, ministry-funded agencies providing person-directed planning are Brampton, Caledon Community Living and Community Living Mississauga. Person-directed planning assists in developing a plan for right now or in the future. It's goal-oriented and they provide steps to achieve said goal, and it is time-limited. For passport funding, this is an individualized funding program for community engagement and participation programs. It's like a reimbursement program that can be used to purchase supports to develop independence, build social and emotional skills, and provide respite to parents and caregivers. So once 18 and DSO eligible, a person can be referred for the initial 5.5 thousand passport funding before completing the application package, which is nice. So you don't have to have those 2 meetings in order to access passport funding. And then after the application package is done, that can be sent over to Passport for further consideration for additional funding. So again, here's some examples about how you can use your passport funding. So you can attend programs, different classes to help gain independence, improve life skills, social skills. They want you to engage in the community activities. So this could be a club membership or doing pre-employment or employment supports. It also can provide reimbursement for transportation to activities, paying for a support worker to help with the community participation and daily living. And then for the most up-to-date guidelines on what passport funding includes, you should definitely connect with Passport directly and talk to them about what is covered during the fiscal year. Here's a little bit more about participation supports. So they do vary from region to region, but they generally offer recreation and leisure activities, supported employment or volunteering, and have a day program options available. There's typically a considerable waiting period for ministry-funded spots for this program. Respite can be requested when an applicant lives with a caregiver, and out-of-home respite can be provided by a ministry-funded agency or can be purchased using passport funding. So these are some specialized in clinical services and supports. So all specialized in clinical services and supports are goal-focused. So service coordination or adult protective service workers, they're kind of like case managers. They coordinate formal and informal services and supports to meet specific goals. These services are often provided on a short-term basis. They can assist with collaborating with other agencies. They can help work with landlords, assist with legal issues. So the difference between service coordination and APSW is service coordination is for those living with family and APSW is for those living independently. We can also provide referrals for behavior management. You would meet with a consultant and they can assist you by assessing your ability to be independent and recommending skills for daily life. They can provide behavioral strategies, training for you and your caregiver, and teach you supports to prevent a crisis. For speech and language, you're working with a speech language pathologist and they can provide assessment and treatment of communication and swallowing disorders. They provide implementation of an augmentative or alternative method of communication. So that could be like sign language. For counseling and social work, we just wanted you to be aware of these options, but right now they're currently only offered in Waterloo. But counseling and social work, they can help you cope with struggles relating to having a diagnosis of an intellectual disability and or autism. And this can be in the form of group sessions, one-to-one, or meeting with multiple family members. And same for healthcare. This is also only in Waterloo, but you can get a healthcare assessment, consultation, and training on a wide variety of medical issues. They can assist with new medical diagnosis. Okay, housing support. So there's 3 types of different housing referrals we can make. So for group living, this is when an individual lives with a few unrelated people and is provided with support for typically 24 hours a day. Supported independent living is for when an individual lives more independently and will typically receive between 2 to 10 hours of support per week. To be registered for supported independent living, an individual must be able to stay alone overnight safely. The last option available is family home, which is when an individual is matched with a family with similar interests, needs, and lifestyle that can provide support to the individual. We don't often recommend having a referral for group living and both supported independent living, since they do heavily vary in the support needs provided. We also have a housing navigator, and her name is Christina. She supports all of Central West region. She can speak with you about individualized housing plans and options for people who are interested in exploring this path. So she can encourage early planning and providing tools to assist with building life skills for independence, provide information about housing options and support services beyond traditional ministry funded models. She has a toolkit she can share with you to help individuals and families develop a housing plan. She can also make referrals to Housing APSW, and they host free webinars monthly on different housing topics. So this is just to recap everything that we've talked about, process and review. So first you would go through intake, which is completed by a coordinator. Then you would have your application package. This is the 2 meetings, the ADSS and the SIS, which are completed by an assessor. And then referrals to services can be made if the applicant's over age of 18. And based on requests and information gathered during these meetings, that's what we would make referrals for. And then from there, you want to make sure you keep all of your information up to date with us. So inform us if anything changes in terms of an individual's needs or caregiver's ability to provide support. So we have 3 offices that cover all of Central West region. I am currently working out of Mississauga office in the Heartland area, if you guys are familiar with that. We do also have one in Kitchener and Milton as well. And then stay in touch. We always want to know if there's any updates, like I was saying, and for any information changes, you can call the toll-free number. And then we just wanted to provide a little bit of information about the Vulnerable Persons Registry. So this allows a caregiver to provide information to the police about a person, which can help during an event of an emergency. So this registry includes information about who to contact in the event of an emergency, a detailed physical description and a photo of the person, and best ways to communicate with that person. So only police will have access to this information if needed. And this information will assist the police in communicating with, attending the residence of, or dealing with an emergency involving this individual. And then here are the websites and information about how to contact the Vulnerable Persons Registry in your specific area. And then I'm finished. Any questions?
Thanks, Sarah. That was a wonderful presentation. Now I'm gonna take a few questions. I see Cynthia's hand up.
Yes, thank you. Sarah, thank you for the presentation. However, it was not very clear. And I'm a settlement worker with Collège Boreal. It's been like 6 months, so I'm kind of new. And I have a question really regarding like the housing support. So if we need like a housing support here at Collège Boreal, we don't offer the service. So I would like to know if we can refer people to you, and what is the eligibility, and what are like the service that you offer for this. Should people be like elderly people, like PR or refugee accepted? What are the conditions?
To be eligible with us, you just have to go through and prove age of residency, Ontario residency, age that you're an adult, and then developmental disability. So once you're eligible with us, you are eligible for life. So age for that doesn't matter. And it is hard for newcomers in order to provide that psychological assessment, because we do want one that's certified by a Canadian body psychologist. Jess, do you have anything you want to say for this?
Yeah, if you're supporting somebody that you believe might have a developmental disability, who maybe doesn't have documentation because they're a newcomer, or maybe just doesn't have documentation from a psychologist about having a developmental disability, then you would just reach out to us to one of our intake coordinators and talk with them about what the options are and what next steps are based on the person's specific scenario. So they can kind of talk you through like what next steps are, where to get a psychological assessment, that information that they would need in order to take a look at next steps.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's what Jessica, that was much more clear. So we do refer people with disability only?
Developmental disability.
Okay, thank you.
Matt, do you want to go next?
I just wanted to add to what Jessica and Sarah were saying, in that and highlight the fact that Sarah said that the registries for all services at DSO, but particularly for housing, are not based on timeframes. So it's not first come, first served. It's a needs-based matching to the available resources. And unfortunately, the wait for housing we're talking years. So it's not something that people are going to access quickly, unfortunately, at this point in time. And I know that because, and Russia and I'm sure we'll get to that in our presentation, but that's part of the work that we do in terms of prioritizing and looking at people most in need of housing.
Thanks, Matt. We have 2 questions in the chat, and I'll then go to Oksana. So first question is from Ingrid, and do we know how long roughly the waiting time for services would be?
I guess it depends on what service they're looking at, because it's all dependent on the availability that the agency has and whether or not they're able to take on more applicants at that time. So I can't really give a ballpark. Again, it's not a first come, first serve. It is matching and linking process. So giving a specific timeline we can't do that.
The next question is from Romina. Do you have this information available online?
Yeah, it should all be on our website. It goes through application process, what we need for eligibility. It should all be on our website.
Perfect. Thanks. Oksana, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you so much for giving me the time to ask the question. At the beginning of the presentation, there was information about psychological assessment and referral from school, as it was on the first or on the second slide, the age limitation, and that the funding could be delivered starting 18. So my question was about school psychological assessment. Is it free option? Is it done by school, or people should first connect with a registered psychologist to get the assessment to be referred to DSO? Thank you so much.
I don't think schools normally provide the psychological assessment. I could totally be wrong. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I can help with that question. Yeah, so sometimes the school does, and sometimes they're not able to. I believe, so I'm mostly in Waterloo, Wellington. I think some school districts do have a limitation on how many that they can do per year for that, and I think that they prioritize based on students most in need. I'm not positive on that in Peel, but that would be something that if a person is in school or has attended school like within Ontario, then they could contact the school board that they had gone to school at to ask for their Ontario student record, or if they're still in school, they could just speak with somebody at their school about accessing any psychological assessments that might be on file. Sometimes people do forget that they've done those because maybe it was quite a few years ago, or maybe it was they kind of saw it as like maybe just like a school assessment and not a psychological assessment. So it's always worthwhile to check with them just to see if that is available. And I'm not sure if there was a second part to that question. I'm sorry.
There actually was a question about if there are any available resources for free psychological assessment. For example, a family has low income, or if you have those kind of resources that you know where we can refer people for that free psychological assessment. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, if they're still in, if they're still in school, they should first start with checking with their school to see if they're able to get that completed there. And then also we would have to explore if one had been completed. So if a person has an IEP or has had an IEP, they can share that with us and we can take a look to see what assessments are noted on there and what next steps might be. If a person is way out of school, maybe didn't attend school in Ontario, then we can certainly still look at other next steps. For example, on a case-by-case basis, we might be able to make a referral for a ministry-funded psychological assessment if we have evidence that a person might have a developmental disability. So we would need to be exploring whether or not they've had a psychological assessment before and receiving all of that information before we can even go to that step, though. And that would be, like I said, on a case-by-case basis, and that would depend on what we receive. So like I said, we would explore if one exists that maybe the person has forgotten about. They'd be checking with their doctor, with their school, with the Ontario student record, and then from there providing some sort of documentation that they might have a suspected developmental disability in order to proceed for the psychological assessment.
Well, thank you so much. So that's basically speaking, you can refer clients to further funding if they might be eligible, even though they did not have psychological assessment just yet, correct? So the caseworker or, for example, newcomer agency can refer a client to you directly. If, for example, client did not have psychological assessment at school, and then you will be able to, maybe you will be able to provide that psychological assessment through different kind of fundings. Is that correct? Or
yes. So if you're working with somebody that they don't have something like that, still reach out to us and connect with us, and then we can talk about next steps. We'll want to know what has been explored. We'll suggest reaching out to the school. We'll make those suggestions that I just mentioned before. First, just to explore if that's been done, because we do need to explore on our end if it's been done, or if that, that's been explored to make sure that an assessment doesn't already exist. And then we go from there with those next steps. So if a person doesn't have it, you could still reach out to intake and have a chat about what next steps would be.
Thanks. Matt, do you want to pitch in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so this has become a big issue in Peel, and we're actually looking to convene a meeting of service providers in the next little while to talk about it. The process that Jessica is talking about is only once you're 18 as well. So there is no access to funded assessments for those prior to 18. There are many people who, as Jessica noted, do access that through the school board. And some of the other children's mental health providers can have also at times provided that, but the demand is increasing and the resources are not keeping pace. So we are looking to convene a meeting in the next month or so to try to explore how we can help guide people through that process. So, but once they are 18, if there are no other options and if there is no, then as Jessica said, you can reach out to the DSO and explore what might be possible. But I just wanted to add that Peel context and just acknowledge that it's a growing need in our community in particular.
Thanks, Matt. We have another questions from Mahasha. Do you have this service in other languages?
What service specifically were you looking for different languages in? We don't have a translator to help with the application process and completing all of those consents needed and the referral forms, but we do have access to translators and interpreters for when completing the 2 application meetings. So it is kind of a barrier for us. You can have that support once you've already been applied. Can families self-refer? Yeah, anyone can refer. You can apply at any time, call us, email us, or access it on our website.
Perfect. Masha, do you have any follow-up questions about the services, or was your question answered? Oh, okay. I got a thanks in the chat box. Any other questions for Sarah and Jessica? I don't see any questions in the chat box or any hands up. So we'll move on to our next speaker from Child Development Resource Center. So I'll pass it on to Gurjeet and Alex for the next part of the presentation. Over to you. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alex, and I am here from InfoPeel along with my colleague Gurjeet. I'm just getting our presentation up, so just give me one moment, please. Sure. Yes, could you? Okay, thank you, Gurjeet. So as you guys can see, we are here from InfoPeel and Service Pathways. Like I said, my name is Alex, and I'm here with my colleague Gurjeet, who will be presenting in the second half of our presentation. But we'll kind of go over the agenda of what we'll speak on today. First, we'll start with what is InfoPeel. So we'll go over our role here, all of our different programs that we facilitate. So we have early years in childcare, early years in childcare system navigation. We host the respite database for Peel Respite Services. We also are the front door to service coordination through Kids Pathways Peel and coordinated service planning. And then for the families who do not fit in with Kids Pathways Peel, there is a special needs informations Peel service coordination program too. So we'll go over all of those in a little more detail and then how to connect with us and how to get families connected to us. Okay, so to start off, the InfoPeel team, we are made up of information and resource specialists. So InfoPeel is part of our larger organization, which is called CDRCP, or Child Development Resource Connection Peel. I'm sure you'll get lots of acronyms, so add that one to the list. Our information and resources are within the Peel region, and it's related to special needs care, child care, early years, or community services. And the InfoPeel team at CDRCP, we act as a front door to service coordination. So what that means is when families are looking to get connected, they'd come to us to create an intake. And once that intake is done, we would determine levels of support and help get them connected. Okay. So the first program that I'll talk about is our childcare in early years. So InfoPeel assists families who are looking for childcare by providing them with a list of the closest licensed childcare facilities to their location. So we often get calls in our call line, and it's families giving us and providing their postal code and requesting that we can get them a list of centers that are near their postal code. So that's something that we're often doing. We also help families to understand the Peel Inclusion Resource Services, so PEERS, which is a partnership program between resource consultants and licensed childcare. This is for children with special needs, and we can inform them on how to get connected by visiting the region's webpage. So we also help families to understand what childcare funding options are available to them and point them in the right direction of where to apply, whether it's childcare subsidy and if they're eligible, or can share information on how to claim their childcare expenses on their tax forms for the Ontario Childcare Tax Credit. We also introduced families who aren't familiar with Early Ons to Early Ons, which are free programs in Ontario for children aged 0 to 6 and their families. So Info Peel maintains the early on calendar for the region of Peel, which is easily accessible to families so they can look and search for different programs near to them each month. We also use the Early Learning and Childcare Directory to help find nearest early-ons or childcare centers. And then lastly, in this regard, we also host monthly parent chats with resource takeaways on a variety of topics for families with children up to 6 years of age. The next program that we facilitate here is respite services. So respite is a service that supports families of children, youth, and adults with special needs by connecting them with self-employed respite providers who meet their specific unique needs through the use of our database. So through respite, families receive support and promote active living and provides temporary relief from the physical and emotional demands that can be involved in caretaking for a family member who has a disability. So with respite, the families can choose if they would like to have support at home, take the provider to support in the community, or maybe to assist with different appointments. So the type of care depends on what the family is specifically looking for. Each family has a different plan. Respite is very flexible and shifts can be adjusted at any time to best meet the current needs of the family. So it's important to know that with this database, it's a family-driven service. So the families are the ones hiring the respite providers and sharing what type of care they're looking for. So CDRCP is the host agency. The service is called respiteservices.com, and we service the region of Peel. So both families and respite providers must create a profile. That's how you get started with this database. So if families are looking to get connected, they would send us an email and we could share the link on how they would register. They would then register and activate their own specific profile. And once it's active, the respite facilitator will send the family respite matches. So it's up to the family to review the different matches, and it's up to the family to reach out to them directly. It's important to know that in our database, we do screen and activate respite providers, but they are independent contractors. So the family would be hiring them directly. We can support on our end through the screening process, how to get set up, questions to ask through the interview process, but ultimately it is done between the family and the independent respite provider. And then some other things we do at InfoPeel is we have and offer community support. So we have monthly webinars and training opportunities. We have some different interactive calendars. We have a SNP calendar. We also have a directory of database directory called SEOC, so we can search different supports and services that are needed within different areas. So families can say if they're looking for speech or OT, we can look at that for them. We also have a resource library at our head office, which is open to the public, and it's used for families and service providers. They can borrow different resources to use with their families. And then lastly, we have our InfoPeel contact lines. So we have our phone lines, which are always available from Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 5, so families can give us a call. We also have our live chat, which we are same time, 8:30 to 5, Monday to Friday, monitoring that, as well as our email. So now I will pass it over to Gurjeet, who will talk and share about Kids Pathways Peel.
Thank you, Alex. So Kids Pathways Peel, before I sort of explain what we do at Kids Pathways Peel, I'm just going to explain sort of what it is. So it's a program that consists of more than just our organization. So it's a network of community partners that provide service coordination specifically for families who live in Peel, so Brampton, Caledon, or Mississauga. So some of our partners, as you can see here, so it's CDRCP, Carey's Place Autism Services, Brampton, Caledon Community Living Mississauga, Arundel Kids Home Community Care Support Services. So basically, we work together, and sort of our organization is the front door of service coordination. So if a family is interested in the program, they would go through us first. And one of the reasons we do this is just so families aren't getting duplicate services from multiple places, and just kind of the way our process works is it just, I'm going to go more into the referral process in a bit, but it's kind of designed so that families can be referred to the organizations that are most appropriate, have the most appropriate programs to support their specific needs. So, oh, there we go. So I feel like a lot of you already know about service coordination, so a lot of this is not going to be new information to you. But we provide service coordination for families, and it's very family centered and goal oriented. So families will let us know kind of the challenges, their goals they have for their family and for their children, and based on those goals, we will help them again either provide services ourselves and information ourselves that to support that family. So information on access to funding or um, sort of whatever they're looking for. And if the family needs more one-on-one support, that's when we would refer to one of our partner agencies that I mentioned earlier. Um, Also, I should mention, so KPP is meant for families with children under the age of 18 who have special needs. And then we do have a program that I'll talk about later for children who are over the age of 18, and also families who are part of KPP. Once their children turn 16, we actually do send out some information to let them know to apply for DSO, for example. So that kind of relates to our earlier presentation there. So yeah, some of the goals we have for service coordination are to find and implement services and supports that match the family's needs, and kind of increase the clarity of who is involved and why. And as I mentioned, sort of the reason why we're the front door is to decrease duplication of service provision. And like I said, sort of just it's a collaborative effort so that we can make sure the family is getting the best support, and are getting referred to the program that's most best suited to support their needs. So the referral process for KPP. So there's two ways to go about it. So families can either, I'd say maybe the easiest way is families can just refer themselves by either calling in, using our last slide, we'll have our contact information. I'll also make sure I know there's going to be an email going out afterwards with the evaluation. I'll make sure to include some information so you guys don't have to worry about copying our contact information later. Basically, we can be contacted through phone, chat, like a live chat on our website, or through email. So again, a family can reach out themselves and let us know they're interested in KPP. A lot of the families that do reach out to us are usually referred maybe by their child's school, a teacher, a doctor, someone's already working with that child, and they'll kind of call us and we'll kind of explain KPP and let them know what it is and how we can support, and then they can let us know whether or not they're interested, and that'll be considered a self-referral. The other way is a community referral. So that's when another agency, someone maybe working with the family, submits a referral on that family's behalf. In this case, they would have to fill out the community referral form that you see on the right of the screen there, and then just have the family sign off on it. So we also do get a lot of questions about like, oh, how do you want the form? Can we fax it or things like that? So we don't accept faxes, but if I know it can be hard, not everyone's able to fill out a form online, print it, scan it, and then send it over. So the best or easiest way is just fill out that form online. It's easily fillable. You just got to click in those little boxes. You can fill it out, print it out, just sign it, and then even take a picture. We try to prefer, we don't really like just filling out the whole form by hand, because a lot of things like emails and things like that, sometimes it's not easily legible. So it just causes delays in the referral process. So that's kind of why we prefer doing that fillable online form. And then basically after that, once we receive the referral, usually there is a wait time, we say 3 to 5 business days. Currently, we are a little bit backlogged, so it might be slightly longer than that. But within that time, we'll reach out to them usually through email first, let them know more about the program and sort of what documents and things we'll need to get started. Once we receive all that information from the family, we'll book what's called an intake call, where we'll be able to sort of discuss with the family their goals, challenges they're facing, maybe what other supports they already have access to, again, just different barriers and things like that. And then based on that information, that's when we'll kind of decide if, based on the family's goals and needs, if it's a family we're going to support ourselves by just providing them the information and things that they need ourselves, or if they need, again, that more one-on-one support, that's when we'll decide if we're going to refer them to one of our partner agencies and which one would be best able to support them. And of course, we also do take into consideration the family's preference. Sometimes we have families who are already like, hey, I'm specifically, I know about this program at Brampton Caledon Community Living that I'm really interested in, but they told us to call you first. So of course, we'll consider that in our decision. And sorry, I probably jumped to this slide a little bit earlier, but basically the way our service works is if families, like I mentioned, it's very, it's driven by the family. So if the family kind of reaches out, but and either their goals are met or they're no longer interested, they can stop at any point, and then any point before their child turns 18, they can reach out to us again and just request like an update, where we'll do like sort of a almost like that intake call I mentioned earlier, but maybe like a more condensed version of that, where we'll kind of get their updated goals and resume services from there. And then, like I mentioned, we have another program. So once, again, the children age out, once they're 18, or if they have a diagnosis, or if they don't have like a diagnosis that on file, or whatever other reasons they're not eligible for KPP, but they would still like support, we have SNP, so Special Needs Information Appeal. So SNP provides similar services as KPP, but just, again, it's more inclusive. But we don't have that, with SNP, we don't really have that referral component to it, where we will refer someone to one of our community partners. We'll just be able to, basically, we have a SNP facilitator, her name's Bailey, and she'll provide families with information on funding or different services in their area that they can look into, and then the family themselves would be able to reach out to them directly rather than being referred to a partner agency directly. And through SNP, Billy would also for sure like let families know about DSO and where they can apply for that and things like that. So yeah, it's just a more inclusive version of KPP, but not as, I guess, without, it's more, it doesn't have that second level of that community partnership. And I know that was rather quick. Me and Alex kind of worked to trim down the fat of this presentation, so I'd be short and to the point. But yeah, that's pretty much everything. But yeah, we're definitely open to questions.
Hey everyone, I see a question in the chat from Angie asking, can anyone access pathways or any specific immigration status? We would need there to be a diagnostic report in order to be eligible for Kids Pathways PL.
And yeah, for immigration status, you have to be a resident. So we would ask for proof of residency. So just something, maybe even like a utility bill or a school report card, something that indicates that the family does live in Brampton, Caledon, or Peel. And then for immigration status, we would accept obviously citizen, permanent resident, refugee status, anything like that. Again, we would ask for proof of status. How can families access SNP? So yeah, for SNP, basically, it would be the same referral process, except obviously we wouldn't, it would be a little bit of a shorter process, but basically we would still review the family's information once they send a referral, and then based on their information, we would either directly connect them with our SNP facilitator, Bailey, if they're not qualified for KPP, and if they are qualified for KPP, we will just refer them there. But the referral process is the same. The family can either directly contact us by phone, email, or chat, or again, community referral form can be submitted. It'd be the same one as the KPP referral form. And then based on what we see in their eligibility for KPP, we would, if they're not eligible, we would just get them involved in SNP.
And even if a family knows right off the bat, either their child or loved one is over the age of 18 or they don't have a diagnosis, you can simply just call our line and just let them know you would like to book an intake with SNP. So our phone number is 905-890-9432. And you can just give us a call, or the family can give us a call and say that they would like some support with some coordination services. And then we would know that they're not eligible for KPP, so they would get sent to our SNP program.
And then, so for the question about diagnostic report, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but yeah, we do accept it if it's from another country. And then for the question about work permit holders, so it's based on the, I should have mentioned, sorry, it's based on the child's status. So yeah, the parents can be work permit holders. It's the child's status that we would need proof of. Yeah, so the next question is if a child is a visitor dependent. So yeah, a child, again, they would need to be permanent resident, refugee status, citizen. They would need status in Canada, but again, for anyone who doesn't meet those KPP requirements for eligibility, we would definitely still accept anyone into SNP.
And also there was a question, are the SUET program accepted too?
Pardon me?
QED programs, people coming from Ukraine under the QED visa?
I've never had that question before. I'm not 100% sure about that one. Alex, are you familiar?
No, but if you could put your email, I think I have your email from before. I can add that to the notes. So I don't know off the top of my head, but we'll look into that for you.
And either way, if they're not, again, we would still say just they can submit a referral, or and if they're not eligible, we usually don't determine eligibility right away when a referral is submitted. We review everything afterwards, and then if again they're not eligible, we can always support them through SNP.
And there's also a question, if the child is visitor dependent on work permit?
I think I might have answered that, but yeah, so for that, so they would need status, as I mentioned, like PR, they had citizen, PR, refugee, but if they're just a visitor, then they can always still refer, but they would be referred to SNP.
Okay. And do you accept medical documents in foreign language?
In a foreign language, I don't think we've ever received that, but we do have a translation service. So we would review the documents. I'm not going to say a yes or no 100%, but we do accept foreign diagnosis reports. As long as I've been here, at least we haven't received one where it's actually been in a foreign language. So again, we would have to review it, see if we could use our translation services to get that translated, and then we would reach out to the family to let them know. Again, it's not something that for eligibilities, especially in specific scenarios like that, we don't really determine it right away. We review the documents after the fact, and then get back to the family afterwards. So yeah, it would depend on the language. If we didn't, it would depend on a few different things, but it's definitely something that, yeah, I would ask that they submit that. And if for whatever reason we can't accept it, we would ask for if they can get a different diagnosis from here, or again, we might just accept them to SNP. But I believe in most cases that would be acceptable.
Thanks, Gurjeet. Are there any other questions for Gurjeet and Alex? I don't see any. Feel free to put your questions in the chat box if you come up with any. Our speakers are still here. So I'll move on to our next speaker. Oh, I see one. Do you provide employment or access to educational institutions for people with disability?
So yeah, we don't provide employment ourselves, but we have, Alex kind of briefly mentioned CEOC, which is sort of a database of community organizations. So if a family is looking for support with employment or access to educational institutions, we can definitely, we'll ask them certain questions to kind of get more specifics. And then based on that information, we can do a search into our database, and we'll give them the information, contact information, and kind of description of other organizations that do provide those services.
So Kraj, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so I have one question. I did the application with the CDRCP for my client. They referred them to development case manager under ability program with the sick kid. And then we got call from them because client stated was a refugee limit. And they said they don't accept refugee limit.
With that one, let me see if we can follow up with that afterwards if you would like. Just send an email. You could just send an email to me so that I can follow up, because if you send it to InfoPeel, it's just going to go to the general database, and we'll kind of just get to it once we'll get to that email. But if you send an email to me afterwards, I can definitely follow up with you on that.
So your email is in chat box?
Yeah.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
And I'll also share Gurjeet's email in the follow-up email that I will be sharing with everyone after the session is over, along with the session recording. So that will also be handy for everyone. Matt, do you want to add in?
I think just for both the DSO and for CDRCP, it's important to note that these are front door to access services, and that most of the services happen with partner agencies. So, connecting with CDRCP and DSO, they may not have the same eligibility requirements as the agencies who provide the services themselves. So I appreciate the work that Gurjeet and Sarah and Alex and Jessica are doing to kind of provide the information around the front door, but it's important to note that these are not necessarily where families access the service themselves, and that each of those agencies, once a referral is made to them, may have different eligibility requirements for particular programs and services.
Right. Thanks, Matt. Any other questions? Okay, I think we are good to move to our next speaker. So I will invite Rasha Spatalo from Peel Crisis Capacity Network for her presentation. Over to you, Rasha.
Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the great presentations from CDRCP and DSO. And Matt, thanks for filling in the blanks. There's a few pieces that I'll sort of fill in too that I kind of wanted to answer, but then I figured I'll just wait until my presentation comes up. So let me just share my screen. Okay, can you guys see the presentation okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Maybe okay. So I'm going to be looking this way, but I'll look back this way every once in a while. So if there's a question or something pops up, please just unmute yourself and ask away, because I may not see it or I may not be able to pick up on it. So the PL Crisis Capacity Network, we're a short-term clinical crisis program. There's myself as the coordinator on the team, and then there are 3 social work facilitators on the team, Ikra, Kira, and Marie. Although I am in the process of hiring someone, as Ikra is going to be taking care of her family. She's having a baby, and so we're going to be adding on another facilitator to the team. So as I mentioned, our program is short-term in nature. It's about 30 to 90 days. It's a voluntary crisis program. It consists of various PL organizations. So our network was made up out of about 26 and growing network partner agencies within the PL region. So the DSO, for example, and CDRCP are some of our great partners in the community that we reach out to quite often. So the those organizations sort of came together and said, you know, we need a crisis service that can support the families and the community in Peel. And all of these organizations that we're connected to provide us with supports and services that we then in turn help our families get connected to. So our mission basically is through our assessments and coordination of short-term and transitional support resources, and in collaboration with our network partners, PCCN's mission is to support children and adults who have a developmental disability and or a dual diagnosis in overcoming crisis. So our eligibility criteria, so folks have to have a developmental disability and or a dual diagnosis. We support anyone that is 11 years of age or older, that resides in Peel and is in crisis and in need of time-limited transitional support. And we really sort of leave crisis undefined, because what may be a crisis for myself may not be a crisis for someone else. So as long as the family, the person is reaching out to us and saying, you know, something has happened and my typical day-to-day is now thrown off and I need support in order to be able to move forward, that's what we go with a crisis, and we sort of jump in and provide services from there. We are able to sort of consult with a family if their child or loved one is younger than the age of 11. We can't formally open a file and provide service, but we can definitely provide consultation and provide some next steps and ensure that they're on the right path in order to get the supports that they need. So typically we get all of our referrals come in through our crisis line. So that is what we call our query process. So they can be consultative in nature, like I mentioned. Sometimes families give us a call and just want to brainstorm resources and supports. Sometimes service providers just reach out to us and also just ask questions and just want to get a better understanding of what resources might be available in the community. So we can definitely provide some of that support. We do get a lot of calls for crisis and safety planning with a client and or with a family. And this is where, you know, it could potentially be a high risk safety situation, maybe an elopement situation, maybe some increased behaviors, whether at home or in the school. We do have sort of the understanding and the knowledge and the training to conduct crisis safety plans. They are not to be confused with behavioral plans, however. So we can go in and provide some safety in the home and ensure that steps are being followed so that crisis is sort of alleviated or de-escalated, but we cannot provide behavior strategies. Those need to be done by a behavioral therapist. And sometimes we go out and sort of do a crisis assessment where the family indicates, you know, we just need a crisis safety plan. So we're able to do that, but then during that meeting and conversation, a lot more information comes out, and then we sort of suggest to the family that it might make sense for us to become engaged and provide further supports and services from there. So if we do become involved and formally open a file, then we would complete what we call a biopsychosocial assessment. And I'll explain in a little bit more what that looks like. And that typically includes the client, the family, and if there are any service providers that are available. And then based on the assessment that we complete, that sort of helps us to decide what services and resources we're going to be able to offer, or if we just sort of provide next steps to the family from there. So how to make a referral. So like I mentioned, our crisis line is typically the best way to make referrals to us. It is monitored all the time by the facilitators on the team. So the crisis line floats between all three facilitators every month. And the only time they don't answer it is if they are in a meeting with a family already, but then the voicemail is checked right after and calls are returned. So really, it's the best way to make a referral to us. Anyone can make a referral to us. So the family, the client themselves can reach out to us, family, a friend, a service provider. As long as you have consent from the person, from the family, you're welcome to give us a call and make the referral and provide the identifying information. If you do not have consent, we're happy to just have a non-disclosing call and do a consultation and just sort of get a better understanding of sort of what's going on hypothetically, and then we can try providing some suggested next steps from there. There are times where we do get those calls without consent, and when we just sort of have an overview of what's going on, we will request that the service provider obtain consent so that we can follow up and provide services further. Or sometimes we'll suggest, you know, if the family wanted to give us a call themselves, then that's also doable. So like I was mentioning, our calls don't necessarily have to just be for a referral. It can be for consultation and or brainstorming. And then from there, we can determine whether it's an appropriate referral to our program or if we can just provide some next steps from there. So there are times where we do decline admission and we're not able to open a file. So the person may not be eligible. So they, as I was mentioning, they might be younger than 11. They may not live in the Peel region, or they may not have a developmental diagnosis. So those are times that we cannot formally open a file. There have been times where the family is not necessarily ready to engage in service. They may already have many services in place, and you know, adding another service provider and having another meeting every week is just too much for the family. So then we would just, again, consult with the service providers that are already connected and then provide some suggested next steps from there. We have had calls where the family is not necessarily in a crisis. They're just looking for resources and just want to get a better understanding of what supports might be available. And then there's also supports requested are outside of the scope of PCCN. So again, housing is a huge, huge issue that comes up. We don't have access to housing. In those cases, we sort of ensure that the person is on the right registries. We ensure that they're connected to the right people. We make sure that everyone that needs to know is aware of the housing request that they have and the housing need that they have, and sort of provide those next steps for them. And then ongoing funding is also another piece that we cannot become engaged for. We just don't have ongoing funding to continuously provide a family. So our crisis line, like I was mentioning, so it is the best way to make a referral to us. We do respond within 24 hours. It's pretty quick that we sort of respond to it. So we respond within 24 hours, but it is not a 24-hour crisis line. So it's a funny crisis line in that it runs from 9 to 5 during business hours. And then we do have our after hours crisis support lines that pick up for us afterwards. So for adults, it's through the Canadian Mental Health Association and their 24/7 crisis support team. It'll reroute them there, and then they'll sort of give us a call the next morning and ask us to follow up with a family. And then for children, it's the Everymind crisis team that picks up for us as well. And then again, they will reach out to us the next morning and then make sure that we connect with the family if need be. So through our crisis line, we do a lot of in-the-moment crisis planning. So at times we do get calls from families where, you know, they might be going through a crisis in the moment at that point. So we can try de-escalating over the phone and providing some supports and strategies over the phone. If it does get too intense and too urgent, then we will suggest a call to 911 be made, or we can support the family in making that call to 911 as well. We do work very collaboratively with the Peel Regional Police, and we do work sort of with their community safety and well-being team and their community mobilization team. So there are times where we may go out and do a crisis plan, and the family will request that we bring the police out with us, especially if families are frightful and hesitant of making that 911 call and want to get better understanding of what that might look like. If they do make the call, then we do have the ability to bring out the Peel Regional Police with us, and then they can answer some of those questions to the family. And then, as mentioned before, there's also the vulnerable persons registry that Sarah, through the DSO presentation, had mentioned prior to, which is also a very, very helpful tool for the Peel Regional Police in responding to calls if calls are being made. So there's, through our crisis line, like I mentioned, we do a lot of consultation and system navigation for whoever is calling, making sure that they're sort of connecting to the appropriate people that they need to be connecting with. And if someone is not appropriate for our supports, then we won't just sort of leave people hanging. So we go by the no door is the wrong door policy. So if they give us a call and we're not the most appropriate person, we'll make sure that they know who to call next. And there are times where we will reach out to that organization with consent, of course, give them a heads up. And sometimes we do that connection right away with the family so that they don't fall through the cracks. So this is sort of a little bit of a visual picture of what our biopsychosocial assessment looks like. So when we talk bio, we're obviously talking biological. So we gather a lot of information around medical, physical state, genetic, vulnerability, gender, immunity, medication effects, what that looks like. And then the psychological piece, so looking into the personality, history of trauma, abuse, and neglect. Any cognitive intellectual pieces, the adaptability, the learning, memory, emotional regulation, and coping skills. And then for the social, we look sort of at the family background, culture, socioeconomic status, education, community, and social support. So it really sort of gives us a full picture of the person that we're supporting, but then it also gives us an understanding of their family, of their culture, their background, and then what resources they would be looking to get engaged in. So our crisis plans, like I mentioned, all of our team members are trained in an evidence-based approach of crisis planning, which is the holistic crisis planning. It is very sort of person and family centered and focuses on strengths of the client and the family system. The people that we support and the families that we're supporting are very, very involved in us developing the crisis plan. So it is really sort of unique for the family and for the person. And we want to ensure that it makes sense for the person to have that coping plan and that they actually do use it. We don't really want to sort of come up with a crisis plan for them and give them strategies if it's not going to make sense for them to use when they need it. So they are very, very involved when we're creating that plan. And it really sort of focuses a lot on strengthening the family system and aiding to stabilize the crisis. We do run Families Connect support groups. So these are support groups that we run for families and caregivers. So typically they're about 8 to 10 weeks that focuses on psychoeducational and mindfulness and some self-care. So we reach out to a lot of our partners that we work with, and then they're able to sort of provide resources and share what their programs and what their agencies are about to some of the families. But we do also focus a lot on navigating through the system, how to navigate through the system as a parent, and then provide them with some coping strategies and ensure that they're also doing some mindfulness and taking care of themselves, especially if they are sort of the driver in the family and the caregiver of the family. We want to ensure that their gas tanks are full so that they can make sure that their family is running properly, because it can be quite a lot of work on caregivers. It provides families who care for people with a dual diagnosis to meet and connect around their strengths and challenges. So it really also gives families a chance to connect with one another. And a lot of times these groups become sort of ongoing groups even after our 8 to 10 weeks are over. And the families that meet during those groups continuously connect with one another and support one another throughout their journeys. We do a lot of, like I mentioned, learning about the system. So we do 2 different groups. One is a children's group, anywhere from 8 to 18 years old, and then one is an adult group from 18 plus. And we typically run them around the spring and fall time. So through our engagement and our involvement, we do have access to some flex funds that we can provide to some of the families and some of the folks that we're supporting. So the funding cannot be used to bypass any current wait lists. And it is not long-term in nature. Like I mentioned, it's a one-time funding allocation. And it cannot be used for individualized funding programs. So it cannot be used sort of for ongoing day programs, for example. It does need to be monitored on an ongoing basis, and there has to be the ability for it to fade out. So it needs to be sort of time limited. It has to have a purpose, and it needs to be able to sort of be like a SMART goal. So for example, if it goes along a clinical support plan, so a lot of times we provide funding to increase respite support for a short amount of time so that other service providers can go in and provide some support to the family. And then the family gets a bit of a break so that they can engage in the services and they can learn some new strategies. The respite just sort of gives them that increased little bit of a break. And like I mentioned, it's a one-time use, and unfortunately, we do not have the option to extend that funding support. So we do have some access to safe beds. So sometimes there are certain crisis situations that pop up where someone is in need of a safe bed for a short, limited amount of time. So if there's construction in someone's home, and the family is indicating, you know, the hammering and the drilling and all of the work sort of is going to be a little bit overwhelming for their loved one, and their son or daughter needs to be out of the home for a limited amount of time while all this construction happens, then we are sort of able to look into one of our safe beds to see if they're appropriate to be in there. And we can do that. Sometimes it's a matter of someone is going to be going into a supported living vacancy, but there's a transition period. The vacancy won't be ready just yet, so they need somewhere to stay for a limited amount of time. We can also check to see if one of our safe beds are available for that. So those are the other pieces. Is we do have availability through our Place Peel, through Central West Specialized Developmental Services, Services and Housing in the province, and then at Triad in Toronto. We have to ensure that the resource is available so that they do have an empty bed for us to access, and it needs to meet their eligibility criteria in order for us to be able to access that. And like I mentioned, there needs to be a discharge plan, so it has to be short-term for us to be able to access that. So we do have an urgent response with our friends at the DSO. So our urgent response protocol for adults develop a work relationship with Developmental Services Ontario. So what this means is PCCN does have the ability to provide short-term, so up to 90 days crisis support to anyone that is not yet deemed eligible to receive adult developmental services. So Sarah and Jessica were talking earlier about psychological assessment and needing to have that to prove that you have a developmental diagnosis. So if you are supporting an adult that seems like they might have a developmental disability, at some point someone told them, yeah, you have a developmental disability, or historically they may have had a psychological assessment, but they might be a newcomer. They don't have their paperwork with them. It's always a good idea to give us a call, reach out to us, let us know. We can do a lot of that digging. We can do a lot of that finding out where that paperwork is, if it's around. If there is good enough reason for us to believe that there is a developmental diagnosis, then we can support in placing them on the funded waitlist to access a psychological assessment. If it's a matter of supporting the person and digging through and finding where that paperwork is, then we can do a lot of that work and support them through it and ensure that the connection to the DSO is happening. If we sort of are on our path and then we realize that, you know, the person may have more of a mental health diagnosis, but not really a developmental diagnosis, We do have partner agencies that are from the mental health sector, and so we can start making those connections, knowing that maybe they might not qualify for Developmental Services Ontario. But we do have that 90-day period where we can become involved and we can support in doing some of that digging and some of that searching to see if the developmental diagnosis is there. So if you're ever on the fence about supporting someone and you're not necessarily sure if they meet the eligibility criteria, please give us a call. And we can definitely support through that process and support you in figuring that out. The system as it is a very confusing system for us as service providers, let alone what it looks like for families. So if you're ever not sure, unclear about something, we would much rather you give us a call, have the conversation with us. If we can support you, we're more than happy to do so. So if you're ever on the fence about giving us a call for whatever reason, I always say, just give us the call. And worst case scenario, we have a great conversation on the phone and we get to know you and we move on from there. That was pretty quick. I tried to condense that as fast as possible. So I know that was a lot of information. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Resha. There was a lot of information, so thank you for that. I see one question from Alia in the chat group. Is the support group hosted at the center?
So it depends. We do try and host one in the Mississauga area and one in the Brampton area. So it really sort of depends on where we can get space, and then we try and alternate, so it's not always in the same area. The information will eventually go up on our website, so pccn.ca, when we do run our next round of groups. So it's a good idea to sort of keep an eye out on there.
Any other questions? I don't see any.
So the only other piece that I just quickly wanted to mention around the psychological assessments is that it is not a huge pool of funding whatsoever. It is a very, very teeny tiny pool of funding. But if anyone is unable to sort of access psychological assessments from anywhere, and different avenues have been tried, and it's still sort of impossible to access a psychological assessment. I'm always happy to consult around that. Sometimes I'm able to sort of get access to funding to provide a psychological assessment. So just give me a call, connect with me. I will put my number and my email in the chat so you guys have that. But I'm always happy to just have a conversation, consult, see if there's a role for me to support in order to do that.
Perfect. We would also like to hear from you all if there is any feedback about these sessions. So I've put the feedback link in the chat box. So if you have time, it's just a quick 2-minute survey. We would like to have your feedback on that. Yes, Matt, please.
Just before we wrap up, I thought I would take a moment to introduce who I am, because I've been speaking at random points throughout the day. I'm the service solutions facilitator, service resolution facilitator in Peel. I do support both children's and adults. So I work with Gurjeet and Sarah and Jessica, Rasha, and I'm leaving someone out. Apologies. But my role essentially is to support in situations where the typical level of service for those who have a developmental disability isn't kind of meeting their needs. So, and that can be for a variety of reasons. And again, my work is both, there's a formal kind of committee process that I help to facilitate, but also, similar to what Rasha said about the no wrong door policy, folks can give me a call, agencies can give me a call all the time, families sometimes reach out directly, other cross-sector partners reach out. because I can also, on an as-needed basis, help direct people to the services that they need. So, and again, the formal kind of processes that are in place are for those who are eligible for services based on the terms outlined by both CDRCP and DSO earlier. But again, I can also help redirect to other sectors, to other community partners. And as I spoke about earlier, part of my role allows me to kind of see big picture. So that's why, I'm involved in helping to arrange the meeting around psychological assessments and things like that, and to flag things directly to the ministry. So particularly around issues like housing that we spoke about earlier. So, I'm always interested in having conversations about developing partnerships, about connecting people and connecting services so that we can provide a kind of more well-rounded experience for the families and the children and adults who access our services. So happy to connect with anyone who has questions about that. I know we're running out of time, but just thought I would kind of speak about my roles quickly. And I will also share my contact information in the chat if anyone wants to reach out.
Right. Thanks, Matt, for adding on to that information. I will also include the information about the speakers, the contact information, and the follow-up email. So whosoever wants to reach out to them for further questions, feel free to do that. And I will be also sharing the recording for this session in the email that I'll be sending after this session. Any other questions? I'm just looking at the comment in the chat box, just appreciating all the presenters and also for all the information that is provided. And lots of thank yous coming in. So thank you, everyone. Since we don't have any further questions, we'll give back 3 minutes of your time to everyone and hope to see you at another sessions. Thank you again to all our speakers for the day. Thank you. Bye.